My name is Juliana Nykolaiszyn with the Oklahoma State University Library. Today is Saturday, June 13th, 2015, and we're in Omaha, Nebraska, interviewing Walter Hackney as part of the O State Stories Oral History Project. Walter, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm happy that you're here, and I welcome you to our home and to Omaha. It's a pleasure having OSU up here.
Absolutely. Well, let's begin by learning a little more about you. Could you tell me the year you were born and where you were born?
Okay, I was born in 1937, August 8, and I was born actually in a small border town to Oklahoma called Coldwater, Kansas. Our little farm and little ranch that I grew up at was in a small, when I say small, Juliana, it was a one house town. And we got fresh bread once a week at our hometown. That was our big name to fame. It was called Lookout, Oklahoma. It was northwest of Alva, Oklahoma, about 50-60 miles out there. And so I was born and raised there. I went through a fifth grade in a one-room country schoolhouse that had all grades through the 8th grade in that one room. And at the 5th grade, I got transferred to the big city of Freedom, Oklahoma. And from the 5th grade through the 8th grade, I went to school there in town, they called it. Then my parents moved into Alva, Oklahoma. And I went through high school at Alva, Oklahoma, as I also did my first 2 years of college at Northwestern State at Alva. At that point in time, I was encouraged to go to Oklahoma A&M at that time and see if I could qualify to be on a livestock judging team that had gotten some good notoriety through the nation under guidance of Dr. Robert Totusek. And so I applied down there and was fortunate to get accepted. And I finished my college then at what became Oklahoma State University.
Well, before we get to your OSU years, I want you to back up a little bit for me and tell me about your parents.
My parents, my mother was of Indian heritage, and she was born and raised in a small town called Scobie, Montana, on a Indian reservation up there. And her family migrated to Lookout, Oklahoma, and homesteaded out there. My father's family came over from London, England, and he, in fact, was the only sibling in a large family that was actually born in the United States. And he and the family also left a town in Kansas where they were sponsored. They moved to western Oklahoma and homesteaded out there at Lookout, Oklahoma. So my background then is my father was a rancher and a farmer, and he had a limited amount of college experience at Kansas State University. He, through the finances of which he wasn't capable to continue, he had to leave the college. which over the years he was very verbal about his college experience and how he wishes that he would have had the chance to finish. And so that was always kind of a promotive force behind myself and my brother and my sister, that if nothing else, we needed probably to finish our college because of the pride it would give our father.
Your early years before your family moved to town, I'm assuming you grew up on the ranch, the homestead.
That's correct.
Tell me a little bit about your chores growing up.
Well, as growing up and including my time as an 8th grader in grade school, I did the normal on-farm chores of that era that most of the young people did. We had a few milk cows, and part of my responsibility was to help milk the cows every day. We had a few hogs, and my father made sure that we had plenty of pork stocked away in the winter for that. And my job there was partially my responsibility to take care and feed the hogs along with my brother and my sister. And then we had a cow-calf operation there on the ranch. And that was always my big desire, was to be able to spend as much time as a real youngster with the cattle out on the pastures, and during the winter feeding them closer in on the winter feeding and that type thing. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I've always felt like, even as we speak, that that was promotive enough that probably made my career pretty easily come by, was my background in regard to the cattle. And then as I progressed through my school, almost all of my activities revolved around livestock. In the schools, I showed calves, I showed lambs, I showed hogs in 4-H and again in FFA, and I was extremely active. It was my luxury that a kid from a background such as we had, that was my luxury to be able to go and become involved in those activities.
Did you ever attend 4-H Roundup as a youngster?
The only thing I can respond to that question is every summer I can recall, I had 2 or 3 days that our local 4-H chapter went to a place in Oklahoma, out northwest Oklahoma. I believe it was Cleo Springs, and they had a summer camp there for 4-H club youngsters. And I can remember going. I can't say I enjoyed it because I was horribly homesick. All the time I wanted to get back home, which was only 2 or 3 days. As far as any other activities, those had to wait till I got into FFA. When I got into FFA in high school, then I became deeply involved in the activities, even into some of the political activities of the Future Farmers of America. And one of my failures that I've always regretted is I tried, and my dad and my mother worked like Trojans to help me prepare a application to become an American Farmer Award in FFA on a national basis. Needless to say, I didn't qualify, but I've put together, and they helped me, a mountain of material, photographs, and letters of recommendation, but it didn't work. I didn't get the honor.
Well, you started your college education in Alva. What were you studying in Alva?
Agriculture.
Okay.
Everything I seem to have done dovetailed itself into some form of an ag-related career ultimately. There's a reason for that, Juliana. When I was 15, there was an enormous epidemic of infantile paralysis, they called it polio.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of, I think, 2 in the whole city of Alva that contacted it. That I vividly recall out on our ranch on Thanksgiving Day in the fall of, I think, 1951, I think it was. I was with a group of friends hunting quail. And the next thing I can recall was about 6 weeks later, I woke up in the hospital in Alva, Oklahoma, and I've never been able to tie anything together in the middle. What it was, they thought initially that I had the huge case of the flu, because it was an unknown really for any of us out there. And then they finally diagnosed it as polio. And I went through the Iron Lung. I went through Hot Springs, Arkansas therapy, Warm Springs, Georgia therapy. At Warm Springs was the one that helped the most. That was the Sister Kinney Foundation, and Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, had formally put that together. I went in there with arm braces and leg braces, and I came out of there with only one brace on crutches, and that was a moral victory for me. But that's also why I was academically a very average student, and athletically I would have made a career of athletics, but this took care of that. And so I had the choice of being into some form of industry, because I could never have gone back home, if you will, physically and done the work that was necessary to run a ranch and to take care of things like that. Mm-hmm. So I did, and I concentrated expressly on that avenue. My instructors seemed to all know that, because without asking, they would make it applicable that I could pick up anything I wanted in regard to an agricultural background, and they would help me promote it and learn it and understand it. As that all dovetailed then, it became livestock. And I was on, fortunately, I was on a winning livestock judging team as a youngster in high school. And we did quite well. And as a result, my instructor at Alva, Oklahoma, was Dr. Leo Brandt. He was a Dr. Totusek of Northwestern. And he's the one that encouraged me. He said, "Walt, you really should go to Oklahoma A&M because you have a inbred talent here that could get more approach in your liking at Oklahoma than you will here. So it was a nice thing, and it was a nice recommendation. I was accepted highly cordially at Oklahoma State, and one of my very, very first knowledgeable things I can really recall was Dr. Totusek. And I can honestly give you very much background and history of my other instructors at Oklahoma State. But everything I did seemed to pertain to something that he sponsored. As a student, I was very impressed, obviously.
Well, how did you get from Alva to Stillwater?
Well, I made an application to go to Oklahoma A&M to school, and in those days, it wasn't as demanding for a student to get down there as it is today. And in my case, it was fairly simple. Dr. Brandt from Alva Northwestern took myself and my parents, and we went down to Stillwater, and he went to the old animal husbandry arena where the offices were of the agricultural group, except for ag education. That wasn't in there, but it was the livestock part of it. And they all knew him, and he introduced me around, and he made it very clear that I wanted to come there, and then he made it very clear that I would really appreciate getting to meet Dr. Robert Totusek. And they made Dr. Totusek became available to us there that day, and in his own way, we could not have been made more welcome. And my dad and my mother made the comment. They said, you've got to come here. This is what you have to do because there's a good future for you here. And as it migrated from that into some intensive classroom work that I was mediocre in, to say the least. I was only mediocre. And but I made passable grades. But I always was waiting on when we started the livestock team workouts, because that was a challenge for me, was to make that team. And that would have been then as a junior, if you will. And I was highly lucky and very fortunate, and I made that team. And we, as a team then, we stayed totally together and were extremely successful as a junior and senior. One of the real national champion livestock judging teams, actually, and all due to Dr. Totusek.
We'll get to your livestock judging in a second.
Yeah.
When you came to Stillwater, where did you live on campus?
I lived off campus. I couldn't afford. I was there on a vocational rehabilitation scholarship due to my polio, and they sponsored me there. That was a political appointment by a politician in our area of Oklahoma, Dr. Lewis Camus, and he sponsored me down there, but I didn't have enough money to live, if you will, on campus or in a fraternity or anything in that regard. So I lived in a garage, above a garage, down on South Washington Street in Stillwater. And if I recall correctly, it was 3rd and Washington. And it was right there in a lady's garage. Up above was a small apartment. Small was 1 room. And that was where I lived.
And did you have a job while you were going through OSU?
No.
Okay.
No, I didn't, for 2 reasons. It took all of my attention completely to concentrate on having a reputation as in the livestock industry to start with as a career when I left Oklahoma State. That was one reason. Second being, I was still on a full leg brace and a crutch, and it isn't as it's simpler today for a handicapped person to get into about any form of activity they want to, and they're acceptable. In those days, it was harder to get a job, if you will, Juliana. Summers, during the summers, I had a job, a good job, and I had a family in my hometown that had wheat combines, and we would take those combines to North Texas in May, just before school was out in the spring, and we would cut wheat from West Texas, up through West Texas, up through eastern Colorado, on into western Nebraska, on into Wyoming and Montana, and then come home in September. And we worked, that was a 24/7 job. And my job was either running a combine or driving a truck. Now, being handicapped to a degree, that wasn't hard to do. That was pretty simply done. And so that was what I did. And that was my job all the way from high school through college every year in the summertime.
So let's talk about the livestock judging team. Tell me a little bit about your fellow teammates.
It was probably the most unforgettable, and it has been the most unforgettable experience. A young man who was really committed to a career, as I was. It was unbelievably satisfying. I had, on the workouts, there would be maybe 10 or 12 individuals who had similar wants and desires as I did. And then you had to qualify through formal workouts, and we would take those infamous Oklahoma State vans, and we would travel all around to purebred sheep breeders, purebred hog breeders, purebred cattle, purebred horse breeders, and we would have formal workouts, and Dr. Totusek would set up classes of those respective species for us to judge there at that place all weekend long. And it was a grilling deal. And we'd judge them visibly, we would place them, and then we would stand in front of him individually and give reasons why we had placed the cattle or hogs or sheep or horses as we did. And my classmates, there wasn't one of them I ever considered that I was better than. Every one of them I envied. Now, when it come time for us to go to Fort Worth, Texas, Houston, Chicago, Kansas City, Denver, when it come time for Dr. Totusek to pick a team, he could take a team plus one alternate. And you just sweat it out, if you will. And I was so fortunate to get picked as one of this team. Now, you weren't, that wasn't a solid deal for you. You had to requalify after you came home from wherever. Then until the next contest, you had to requalify. And so you just were continually sweating it out if you were going to or were not going to make this team. And as it turned out, I was so fortunate. And I always, in my private time, wondered, am I qualified? Was I really qualified to be on this team? Or was it kind of a sympathy vote? I would never ask the question. No one ever brought it up. And my friends that were in the team never once acknowledged any of that. And we'd get somewhere, and if there were steps that had to be conquered, or if there was luggage that had to be carried, if I was slow, which I was always slow, they were always right there behind me carrying the material that I should have been carrying. It was that kind of a relationship. After we graduated, after intense 2 years of livestock judging, our relationship is exactly as binding now as it was then. We've lost some of our fellow teammates, but the ones that are still able, we are highly active at the animal science reunion at Oklahoma State now, every April. And we have a huge time down there for 3 days, and it's one of my real highlights of my year is to be able to go there for that. And the others seem to feel the same way, the other guys. In those days, there were no ladies, women on the team. And I always questioned that. I wondered why. Well, it was pretty obvious there wasn't any ladies in the workouts, for instance, trying to qualify. Well, that answered my question. I never wondered why wasn't there some there. They just weren't there. Now, going back, I can see those young ladies up there, and in many cases, they're the leader of the teams, the livestock judging teams. And I thought, that's wonderful. That is so aggressive for the college to be able to do that. And I know that that's noticed by a lot of people. None of my teammates have ever mentioned it. It's never come up, but we all sit there during the banquets and so forth, and all of us admire the fact that those livestock teams they introduce are made up of ladies and men, both. And there's no differentials, and that's what I like.
Well, tell me about the national championship year.
It wasn't by accident, Juliana. We were grooming ourselves for that. We had talked and talked and talked in our private time, never in front of Dr. Totusek. We felt a little bit intimidated, to talk about it in front of him. But as a team, when we were in maybe Chicago, maybe wherever, as the year started, we knew what was in front of us if we were the same team at every contest, if we qualified that way. We knew our goal was to win every darn one of them. And we started out, and we did, and we won the International, we won the American Royal, we won Fort Worth, Houston, and it was one of those unbelievable experiences that a young person like me will ever have. And you just never forget it. And to say what was it like, I can't describe how, if you were on a baseball team and won the World Series, what was that like? Or if you were a national champion football player, what was that like? I don't know. I know that it was a pride thing, but it was a thing that we never bragged about, if that's a proper term. We felt that we'd earned it, and we knew that our abilities had been recognized by our superiors because part of that judging, the classes that we were subjected to in each of those contests were put a final placing on each of the classes by a national well-known expert in that field. So we respected and honored his or her opinion. And so we knew that when come time, that contest was going to get won or lost with our ability to express oral reasons. And that's where you sweat blood, if you will, as a young guy. And we had our notes, and we'd sequester ourselves individually off in the corners of some huge coliseum somewhere. And at the same time, there would be a person as nationally recognized as Dr. Totusek. He would be sitting over there in a chair, and when your turn came, you walked in front of him very privately, and you introduced yourself, and you gave a set of reasons that you placed these cattle or hogs or whatever. And sometimes you'd stand there and you knew that the term was, you knew you had busted the class, in that you had placed it so wrong it was pitiful compared to what the expert had placed them. But you had to justify why you had placed them that way. And a lot of humor came out of that in later years. Todd was always very verbal in our private time about, he'd name one of us and he'd say, Walt, I was talking to Dr. So-and-so from Purdue that you gave the oral reasons on that class of Barras, and why would you ever have said what you told me you said? I don't know, but it looked right at the time. But anyway, we did well doing the best we could, and we got the honors of doing it. Now that has been replicated, it has been done extremely well, and probably in tougher competition, and probably by sharper individuals than we were, because on those animal science reunions, when they introduce the judging teams, they have all their trophies and so forth up there they've won. All we can do is just sit there and envy it. But we won our share.
Was there a contest that really just sticks out in your mind during your time?
The American Royal was always the big challenge. Should have been actually the International in Chicago, but really, in my mind, my big challenge was the American Royal. And I practiced at home, I practiced, and you'll appreciate possibly, when we weren't in a workout, we were still practicing. We'd take a class that we remembered that we'd judged in our workout. At home, we'd stand in front of a mirror privately, and we would give oral reasons to ourselves in that mirror. If you've never done anything like that, that's harder than giving it to a person sitting there. And we practice incessantly on how to do our workouts, and we carried them through to the next workout. And we practiced all the time. And I know that people got tired of us. We didn't get to go to all the places we wanted to go socially. We didn't get to do a lot of those things. But then again, there were a lot of things we did do that we shouldn't have.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Oh, no.
Why don't you tell me about some of them?
Well, some of them are not need to know information. Some of them are so off the wall that you wonder how you survived. And I can only give you one. I'll give you an example that I have used. I was also on the rodeo team, rodeo club, and I rode bulls, and I rode saddle broncs, and I was never a star of any kind, but at least I made the team. And we were at Oklahoma State, block and bridle rodeo, and that was a social event during the time in those days, back in the day, when they had what was called Western Week at Oklahoma State. I don't know that you even have that now. But the fraternities and the sororities and the independents, they would all dress Western, and they'd have their neckerchiefs and have cowboy hat, and if they could find boots, they wore them, and so forth. And the old animals husbandry arena would be packed. And after, on the last day of the rodeo, it was a kind of a ritual that the fraternities and the sororities would go to the top floor of the Student Union building on the big dance hall up there is what we called it, a wooden, huge room. And they would migrate up there after the last performance, and they'd have a cowboy dance up there. Well, none of us at that time were invited to that party. And we had put on the rodeo. We were beat up, we were crippled up as I was, but then again beat up from riding and getting injured and so forth. And so we were sitting after the rodeo behind the chutes at the rodeo, sitting around horse trailers and pickup trucks and so forth. And we were drinking beer. And one thing led to another. And finally it said, it just is not fair that we have gone to all this effort to entertain the students, And then when time comes for a nice party and a relaxing deal, we weren't invited. And that conversation evolved and it developed and it got bigger and it got bigger. And finally, the clown, who was a student at Oklahoma State, said, well, let's go to it. They surely won't throw us out. Sounds right. Sounds the right thing to do. Only he had a Brahma bull. Probably weighed, I don't know, 2,000 pounds. Huge bull named Jimbo. Well, I was beat up and I couldn't, we loaded the bull in the horse trailer and there was 5 or 6 of us. And we pulled the horse trailer around behind the student union to what was then a parking lot there. And it was dark at night, and we unloaded Jimbo, put the saddle on him and so forth. He was broke to ride, just like a horse. Tame, nice, quiet guy. And the idea being, in order for me to go with the guys, I had to ride Jimbo, which I willingly did. And a huge mistake, of course. And we went down below behind the student union through those doors in the student union lower floor there, went down to where there was an elevator, but the weight restriction on it wasn't proper for us to put us and Jimbo in that elevator. In fact, we couldn't have gotten in it, I don't think. But there was a freight elevator that was much bigger on down a little bit. It was bigger and it would take the weight. So we went down there and got on, went up, and as I recall, Juliana, it was the 5th floor of the student union was where that was. And we unloaded and up hallway and that big room where the dance was had big wooden doors that opened, I can recall. And one of the guys opened them doors and this place was just loaded up with students in there having a great time, dancing and everything. So we went in, we being all of us and Jimbo. And we got in there and all those students, the mass majority of them, all they could think about was that Brahma bull and what they'd seen those bulls doing during the rodeo, eating the cowboys alive, you know. And they started moving around and quite a bit of activity trying to get out of the dance hall. And it excited Jimbo and he started moving around a little more than he should have. And that floor was very slick and he went down and couldn't get up. And every time he'd try to get up, his feet would move on that slick floor. So we took off our jackets and we laid them on the floor under his feet to give him some traction, and we got him up and we got him out of there, and we knew we were in trouble because those students were just screaming and it was a panic issue. And we got out the door, got over to that elevator, got down to that initial first floor, got up to the outside door we'd come in at, and we're just going through it, and the campus security were waiting on us out there, or showed up. Now that should have been the end of the story, but the fact remains, we were escorted back over to the animal husbandry arena. We put Jimbo away over there, and then we were escorted to the police station on campus at that time. And as a result of all of that, there was quite a little activity going on among the academia of the college and us. And the question was, do we even want these people? And it boiled down to, we all got excused for a few days, but the guy that owned the bull, he got expelled forever. And he was eliminated from college. It was unfortunate as it should have been. He was a senior and would have been graduating and never got to graduate. And he, in fact, went to Fort Worth, Texas and passed away down there. But that was the end of the story that you wonder if it was, you probably should have forgotten about it. But over the years, people wouldn't let us forget about it. And it's a one story. The other being we all had our share of catching the ducks out of Theta Pond at night. And all of those things that continue to probably go on, I'm not sure. But that was the big glamour issue at that time. And one very quick issue that occurred was later on, which if we get to it, I was vice president of a national company. My president went to Stillwater to an agricultural seminar during the course of that time. And when he came home, Mr. Woodman said, "Walt, if you got time, come down to my office." He said, "I'd like to share with you my experience down at your old alma mater." And I said, great. Pure ignorance, or I wouldn't have gone. I went down to his office. And he said, "Walt," he said, I've got to bring it up to you." He said, "The darndest thing occurred. I was sitting in a banquet at Stillwater, and one of the department heads was sitting beside me and introduced himself. And I said, "Well, I'm not sure I'd know who it was." He said, "Well, it was Dr. Robert Totusek." And I thought, oh gosh. And he said, "And he told me a story about you." And then he related Jimbo the Bull story. What do you say? And it's been that since then that people won't leave you alone on the thing you prefer. It never have happened, of course.
Well, let's talk a little more about Dr. Totusek. Tell me a little bit about the man.
First of all, to have never known him, to have never met him before, which was my case, I thought he was a student at Oklahoma A&M when I went there. I might ought to qualify that. In 1957, at a football game, they formally changed the name from Oklahoma A&M to Oklahoma State University. And they had our rodeo team, who we were all horseback, carrying flags, and we rode in and we went around the track that went around the football field during the football game at halftime. And that was nice, and that was an honorarium that we'll remember. But what I'll really recall is one day here a few years ago, I was at an animal science reunion, and we were off in a car touring the campus, looking at the new buildings and so forth. And over outside of I believe it's the wrestling arena, there's a bronze out there of some cowboys riding. Well, that was a photograph that was taken of us when we did the football field when they changed the name. And they took that photograph and turned it into that bronze. And so I always manage to take people that I know, like my wife. I said, see that? And she said, oh, let's go see something more interesting. Now, Dr. Totusek. We all we respected him so much that none of us were about to ask him how old he was. But he did not look much older than we were. Come to find out, he wasn't a lot older than we were. But his maturity was phenomenal. And there was never a time when any of us disregarded any of his stature or any of his comments or anything in that regard. We took everything he said and done as gospel, and we actually lived and breathed on what he instructed us to do. That was the type of respect that we had for the man. And then over the years, that evolved into a family atmosphere. Every April, we have the reunion, and Dr. Totusek would personally call each one of us that had been on that team to be sure that we were coming to that reunion. And we did. We would not have not gone. And we did, and we went. We'd check in at a hotel there. That evening when we check in, Nell and Dr. Totusek would invariably arrive about after it was time that all the guys were there and their wives. And then he had made plans to go out to Freddie Paul's, have a dinner aligned for all of us out there. And we would try to buy his and Nell's dinners. It never happened. He would never take a gratuity from any of us for any condition, ever. And the respect that we learned over the nation as a result of us having him as our team coach was phenomenal. And never would you run into an agricultural person in the nation that wasn't very aware of Dr. Totusek and very complimentary of his abilities. And for a guy that grew up on a little wheat farm up by Enid, Garber, Oklahoma, we just thought it was phenomenal. And then when we got out of school and graduated, it never ended. Todd would call here, maybe at least once a month, and sometimes once every couple weeks, just to visit, and then he'd get off, but he'd call one of the other guys immediately, and then he did that all those years. And it's hard for me to go much further with it because it was all due to respect for the man. But I got cancer in 2013, and they had to do a lung operation and it was in other areas of my body. And I don't know how the word got out to him, but nearly every day that I was recuperating here and at the hospitals, he would call. you'd had to experience the thing and understand how much I appreciated that. He didn't have to do that. He had other, Kim Brock, he had Kim, he'd have him on the phone now and then. And it wasn't that Kim and I, nor any of us and Kim were good friends. It was just that told him to call, and he did. And he was that kind of a man. And we noticed as we matured, which we had a lot of maturing to do, as we matured, we noticed, in my case, and if you care to, we could go into that. I went into industry in a fairly significant manner, and I couldn't run into, in my field of packing companies, beef packing companies, hog packing companies, I couldn't run into figurative people in those areas that may even come up and say, "Did you happen to know Bob Totusek?" I said, "No, did I ever?" So I can't speak highly enough, Juliana.
I could tell he's been very special and instrumental in your life and career.
Career, he got me my job.
Well, let's talk about your career after you graduated.
Well, grades, GPA, none of this was so important when I graduated in 1959. If you got a piece of paper, that was a moral victory, and you got out of Dodge City in a hurry. I went to Todd at one point, and I might back up a little bit. Before I graduated, the last semester, at the end of my next to last semester, he called me into his office, still in the animals husbandry arena. It's the old animal husbandry arena. He said, "Walt, I have made an error in your respect." And he said, "We've got to do something about it, or you've got to spend another year in school to graduate. Your hours are wrong, and we've not gotten you the right credits." I couldn't have spent another minute at college. I wanted to get out of there. And I said, "Well, what's my alternative?" Well, he said, "You've been carrying 16 credits per semester, and that hasn't worked in your case." And he said, "Partially it's due to some of the transferring that was done initially from Alva and Northwestern down here." He said, "That got lost in the shuffle some way." I said, "Well, what do I have to do? Because I can't spend another year." He said, "This next semester, you have to carry 23 hours. I said, "Okay." I had no opinion what 23 hours meant. I didn't know what I was agreeing to do, but I did. And he made me report to him every week. And if I was ever in any issue with any subject, I would tell him, and he would either straighten me up or he would bring an individual in that would straighten me up. And so I graduated. So there, I did graduate. And when I was close, I had applied around, but it was still that syndrome of, I'd go for, my credentials were excellent. The judging team, everything was just really good, except when I'd go for a personal interview, it would become a little bit of an issue because of handicap. Todd said, this isn't the way it's going to work. He said, we're going to make it work. And he got me my first job as a trainee. That's what I wanted to do, was be a cattle buyer, a professional cattle buyer. He got me my first job with a company called John Morrell and Company, a meat packer, which in the day were of the top 5 packers in the nation. And this plant was in Ottumwa, Iowa. And I went up for my interview, and the head buyer, that's who I interviewed with, he just talked like we are, and he said, I'll get back with you. Never any mention about could I, or are you capable, are you able? I went home and I didn't know where I was, and I got back to Oklahoma and I told my friends, I said, I doubt if they'll accept me, but we'll see. That phone call followed me to Dr. Totusek, and that head buyer called him nearly before I got to Oklahoma and said, we want to hire this guy. Todd called me, said, get over here, we need to talk. And he told me. And we called from his office up there to Ottumwa. Never had any clue that I'd be accepted, you know. And they accepted me. We secured a salary, which was peanuts, but it was more than I'd had. And the day I graduated from Oklahoma State was in the stadium, and my parents were there, and my sister was there. And I came out when it was completed, I came out behind the stadium, and I handed my mother my cap and gown, and I gave them all a hug. I got in my car and drove that day to Ottumwa, Iowa. And the next morning at 5:00 a.m., I was on the job, and as a trainee cattle buyer. And I had visions of milk and honey, of being a trainee cattle buyer, what I've always wanted to do. And I got to the scale house in the plant down where the live cattle came in, prior, of course, to slaughter. And they said, Walt, you put on those knee-high rubber boots, and you put on this raincoat type of a waterproof top, and we'll show you where we want you stationed now until we change it. And it was washing with a fire hose the manure out of the pens after they'd emptied the pen and took the cattle up to the kill floor. I had to clean those pens that were appropriate for the health people and the USDA, and so they'd inspect my work. And that was my job for 4 months.
Wow.
And as I'm out there washing the pen, I'm thinking, I've got a diploma, and I'm capable of being a cattle buyer, but here I am. I was ashamed to tell anybody what I was doing, you know. Then it progressed from there. And within about less than a year, I'd been qualified. I'd been given a company car, which I dreamed of having, and I was given the chore of riding with seasoned cattle buyers to learn their techniques as they personally applied their work out buying the cattle. And then in about 2 or 3 months after that, I was given a territory of my own and told to go get after it. And I started that way. And in a year, we were living in western Iowa. And a new company came into existence called Iowa Beef Packers. And it was destined to become the largest packing company in the world. But at the moment, it had one packing plant in a small town in Iowa, and it was an independent plant. We didn't have the support of the big five like Morale had been and all of that. And they came to me and said, we would like to hire you as a trainee for us. And I said, I'm through with the trainee business. I've been there and done that. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing because I'm able to do my finished work now. And they said, well, okay, we'll hire you to do the finished work then. We want you to come to work for us as one of our original 13 cattle buyers. And they offered me a salary that was a little more than double what I'd been making at Morale. And we needed the income. And I was with them then, and then from there my career kick-started, and really kick-started then through the years.
So, you've done many, many things
I
in
have.
agriculture.
I have.
What's been your favorite? You started your own company.
The challenge of starting my own company came about, well, briefly, I was with this Iowa Beef Packers. And then a national cooperative, farm cooperative in Kansas City called Farmland Industries contacted me, and they said, we are building a new beef plant in Garden City, Kansas. And we would like to talk to you about becoming head cattle buyer for that plant. Well, that was a huge move, and I was still young as I could be, a kid on the street, if you will. So we went out, we looked it over, and again, it was a salary thing, but it was promotive of my career, and I could tell it was. And if I could make it work, it would come back to me in dividends at another day. We moved to Garden City. I was running their buy, if you will, for the plant. And their national president out of Kansas City had an annual meeting in Dodge City, Kansas one night, and we were obligated to be there. And we were sitting there, and he said, our plant manager has resigned, and we'd like to introduce our new plant manager. And I thought, geez, I wonder. And he said, Walt, would you mind standing up? I didn't think I could get to my feet. So that kick-started, if you will, another facet of a career. I elevated from being a country cattle buyer and head of other country cattle buyers to a plant manager for 2 years. And another company that was a high competitor by then of Iowa Beef Packers was called Missouri Beef Packers. And they were in Amarillo, Texas, Rockport, Missouri, Boise, Idaho, Freona, Texas, Dodge City, Kansas, and they were enormous in size. And they flew into Garden City one day and said, our purpose in wanting to visit is we'd like for you to become our corporate head cattle buyer, which meant they had about 70 national cattle buyers strung from Illinois to Idaho and all points in between. And I reviewed their whole deal as best I could, and it was such a huge promotion. And my wife and I agreed, and they moved us then to Amarillo. And that's where their corporate offices were at that time. And so I was corporate head cattle buyer, which was goes without saying in my field. That was quite a feather in my cap, and I knew it. And in my quiet time, I'd yahoo, you know. But after a while, the political influence put on me, in the corporate world was not what I wanted. I didn't like the corporate influence and what it caused me to, I feared, become. And one day I told my wife, I said, I'm really tired of this corporate work, and what I'd really like to do is, with all of my years of contacts that I've made of cattle producers, I think I could start a feeder cattle department or company, and I believe we can make a success out of it. And it meant moving from West Texas to Omaha, and then it meant renewing all of those old acquaintances and getting the money that I required for a line of credit to operate a company of the size I needed to make a good living. And we accomplished all of that, and that's what I've done then ever since. But along the way, National Farm Organization came to me, and they said we would like to hire you to be National Livestock Director of our farm organization. They were in nearly all the states and so forth. And I said, no, I really don't want to do that, except as if you want to hire me on just a management deal where I get the job done and I set up the parameters of the work, and then you are responsible for seeing that it gets done. And they said, we'll do that. So I did that for a long time. And Farm Credit Services, a government national lender, got a hold of me. And they said, we've noticed of you building these livestock programs nationally, all over the nation, and we would like to ask if you would conduct risk management seminars for us on our behalf in our branch banks on a national program. And I said, if I can do it on my schedule, I will, because I've got my company that I cannot let suffer because of obligations I have. But I will work hard to set up a program schedule that will allow it if that's workable for you, which is what they wanted to do. So I hired the head of the swine department at Iowa State University, Lauren Christian. I hired the largest hog producer at that time, independent hog producer in the nation, independent, not a corporate. And he was in Minnesota, and I hired him. I hired a certified public accountant that had huge ability for estate planning and that type thing. Anyway, I hired 4 of that quality people, and I took on the physical part of moving livestock, hogs and cattle, how to handle them, how to market them, and and I did that for about 4 years, and it got to the point where it was, I'd done about all I knew how I could do. So I went to them. I said, if you need my help, I'll be available. But right now, I think I've gone as far as I can go. And I dropped then that, and as then a result, I've been doing my company work. I have a partner, and we have offices here, and offices in Iowa. And he handles the eastern area from East Iowa to Virginia and into Alabama, Mississippi, and Kentucky, and in that country to Tennessee. I handle the western country from western Kansas, Colorado, Texas, on out into Montana and Wyoming, Colorado, South Dakota. And we have men that work formally for us also to give us the assistance we've got to have. And that's kind of the long-winded story of what I have done, but to make your point valid, I have had quite a bit of different venue of things.
A wide variety of things.
Yeah.
So you spoke a lot about being a cattle buyer. What goes into making a successful cattle buyer?
Your ability to develop credibility. If you don't have credibility with whomever it is that you're doing business, either buying from or buying for, either or, you can't make it. And there's many, many, many in our competitors that are in that category, and they struggle and they get into some of the worst messes that are possible. And it's due to the fact that the people they're doing business for or with don't trust them. If you can develop that one trait with your clientele, you've got a large amount. If your talent is there to formally produce what you claim you can do, you got it made. And so I've worked hard at doing that, and I haven't changed anything in my lifestyle that would threaten my credibility I've developed over the years. I do a lot of national speaking. I go to state and national Cattlemen Association meetings as a banquet speaker, if you will. I go to some of college activities around the country. I do that, but my goal in doing so is to further my credibility. And I don't want to go in as some form of a braggart or anything in that regard. I simply want them to see me as a person they would like to do business with. And that's my goal now, is to sell myself.
And you're also doing some work, and you have been for quite some time, with Iowa Public Television.
I have. I was sitting someplace in 1978, and an individual called and wanted to visit with me, and from Iowa Public Broadcasting. I didn't even know what that was. They came to my office And they said, what we do, and they explained that they have a feature every month on their show, and it's syndicated into 34 states at Des Moines, Iowa Public Television. And it's syndicated into 34 states, and we would like to have you feature the livestock analyzation of that program every month, once a month. I said, that can't be any big deal, but I'll do it. Well, you know, I did it, and back to selling myself, I started getting all these calls from California, New York, and Canada, and wherever. And they had seen the show and respected my viewpoint on what it was that I was discussing on this market to market. And all of a sudden I saw elevation in our business activity of the company. And so it's been that way ever since. And even to the point where I have told them lately, I've said, you really need to find some young blood in here. And they said, well, no one's complained yet, so we want to continue doing what we're doing. Up to the point where last year I was in Montana exercising delivery of cattle off contracts that I had written earlier in the year, last year. And I get this call, and it was from public television, and they said, we want to send a camera crew out to Montana, and we want to see you in your physical activities. We want to know and see and document what you're doing. I said, well, okay, which they did. And we started out in Billings, Montana. I took delivery of quite a few ranches there, and they had their camera crew there, and they were cowboying it. They were filming the trucks coming in with the cattle, weighing the cattle, loading the cattle back out to whomever it was I had sold them to. And we did that for about, I guess, 10 days. And I thought, well, that's about it. And they said, where are you going now? And I said, well, I'm on a schedule. I'm going to Wyoming. And my first stop is Tin Sleep, Wyoming. And they thought, oh man, the romance of Tin Sleep, Wyoming. So they said, if you don't mind, I said, just be careful and don't get run over out in the stockyards. Just be careful, be sensitive that these animals don't know you like I do. We spent a little over a week in Wyoming at 3 or 4 different Jackson Hole, Tin Sleep, Rock Springs, to name a few. They were there with their cameras and everything. And they said, well, are you going back to Omaha? And I said, no, I got to go on down to Colorado in the high country by Grand Junction, Colorado, and an area called Grand Mesa, Colorado, in the Rockies, because I've also got cattle to take delivery on there. And at these deliveries, I have the people that work for the company. They're there also assisting me to do a lot of the physical work and that type thing, you know, and I have them set up to be ready for me to arrive, and we start then taking delivery. We went to Colorado, and here they were, and they took. So anyway, last Tuesday, I said, what'd you guys ever do with that filming? You spent almost a month out there with me. And they said, oh, we're making a documentary for Iowa, for public television. We're making a documentary for public television that we are orchestrating on their behalf. And we'll finish it toward fall this year. And last Tuesday, they wanted to go down to our accounting offices in Albia, Iowa, and they wanted to see the activity in-house that we do in respect to payables, credit assurance, and all of those things that we have to do in that. And they spent one day in the office filming everybody in there, which was a big experience. So that was a nice thing, and that came out of the Iowa Public Television. Another thing that's been an enormous compliment to our company, and really our credibility, is have you heard of DTN?
Mm-mm.
Data Transmission Network? Well, it's out of Omaha, Nebraska, and it's got like 130,000 subscribers. And what it is a marketing system that's set up through receivers that people subscribe for, and they get the receiver, and that's programmed with a dish that feeds off a satellite at another area 20,000 mile away, and it you put the information into it every day. I put out a market summary every day on that, 5 days a week. And they fire that up to that, and then it goes down to those subscribers. And that has been phenomenal for us as far as exposure goes, because it's our company's name and everything on there, and people will call, they either agree or disagree with what I have said about the markets and the conditions. But the fact is, they're reading it, and and our business again has appreciated from that. So that is kind of the sum and substance of me. It's nothing elaborate, it's nothing exceptional. The one thing that I'm phenomenally proud of is our family. And my wife, obviously, a native Iowan. I met when I first went to Morrell, Lebatoma, Iowa. We have a son that's a director of beef sales for Tyson Foods, and he's in their corporate offices up by Sioux City, Iowa. Our daughter is in Chatsworth, California, and she started being a special education instructor out there, and she then over the years it became more than what she wanted to devote to, and so now her career is training horses and living in a beautiful place there in Chatsworth, California. And she has a family, her husband, and they have 4 children, and they're loving it out there in the sun and the sand, you know. I would prefer them being back here. And then our grandkids are just the pride of our lives, and we incessantly brag about our grandkids. And I hope they appreciate it because we're very complimentary of them. And that's kind of the story as far as myself, and if anything I've ever done has influenced the industry, that would probably be my biggest attempt, would be to influence the livestock industry. And that's what I actually did with this Farm Credit Services of America in those monthly meetings that we would have around the nation. My objective there was to influence agricultural producers of livestock how to nutritionally and genetically improve their productivity to where it would become more saleable to the consumer public.
So increasing gain, or?
Increasing gain, increasing, if you will, cutability, through a series of shear tests on tenderness, through the genetics and so forth, making them aware. A lot of producers earlier on didn't even know what EPDs were in the genetics of cattle, which was the expected progeny deficiencies. And in those regards, they would look at you like a deer in the headlights when you started talking like, oh God, we got to sit through this. That wasn't the case. After a little bit, they said, boy, I need to know more about that. That will influence my productivity and my income also. And so I made that my personal objective in all those meetings, was to make that kind of an input to the industry. And I hope that that'll be part of my eulogy.
Part of your legacy.
There you go.
Well, can you talk a little bit about how attending OSU and earning your degree made an impact on your life? Earning your degree and attending OSU, how did it make an impact on your life?
I would have been in some form of a financial assistance program on the dole, if you will, had I not had my experience at Oklahoma State University. Had I not had the support that the people I was closely connected with there, had they not supported me and recommended me and taught me, you would easily understand. I knew nothing when I came to Oklahoma State. I was the epitome of a redneck. I didn't understand many things. I knew how to chew tobacco. I knew how to drink beer. And I knew what I liked to do, but I didn't know how to get to that goal, which was the livestock industry. I wanted to become a player in the livestock industry, but I had no opinion of how to get there. Oklahoma State taught me those rules of participation that I had to have. And they let me know in no uncertain terms, you have a choice. You don't have to commit yourself here. But if you do, your odds are good in your case of succeeding to do those things that you want to set up for your goals. But if you don't want to apply yourself, it won't happen, and that will be of no fault for Oklahoma State. We'll have your tuition money, and we'll have all of that. We'll have out of you what we wanted. They didn't say that, but that's what I thought they were looking at me to do. And I thought, you're not going to get a pound of flesh from me. I'm going to do what you tell me to do. And I did exactly as near as I could what they told me to do. Taught me is a better word, I'm sure. And I worked hard at absorbing what I was being told, because no one in my background was ever qualified. No, not critical of that, but they just weren't qualified to teach me those things. And I sure didn't know it. And it was through application that I learned it. And I learned the applications at Oklahoma State.
Well, you could definitely see how it impacted your life, and you took the ball and you ran with it.
I had to.
Mm-hmm.
You see, I had to. There comes a time when conditions insist that you take the ball and you run with it, or you fail miserably. And that's what I recognized early on. I recognized early on that I had some phenomenal challenges facing me that I would have to really apply myself to in order to overcome some of it. And I worked, and I did. I did a lot of it in my private time, my quiet time. I should have done this, I should have done that, the woulda, coulda, shoulda syndrome. But it was Oklahoma State. Up at Alva, I got the prerequisites, and I did, and they were really nice with me. And this Dr. Brandt was a great man. But he was, if you will, junior college material. When I wanted to get to the pro ranks, I had to go to Dr. Totusek. And that's where I was able to go through the help of people that helped me. A lot of what I was able to do in that regard really didn't have much to do with my talents or reputation. It was the people that were helping me. And they really, really helped me all the way through. And they took me down there, and my parents, bless their hearts, they weren't qualified. They didn't know. They just knew that was a good idea but they weren't sure that if I was a wild and crazy country kid, and they hoped that somebody could put the rein on me. And they did. Down in Stillwater.
Well, Walt, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close out today? I know we covered just a fraction.
Probably more than you wanted.
Just a fraction.
I hope part of it is something that's of any value to you. I really do.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you so much.
And to answer your question, no, there's so much, and you can't be involved in this career life and really addictive. I'm addicted to it, and I hope that's evident. I'm totally addicted to my career. And people know that, I think, that are around me. People that don't know it are bored to death, and they don't want to even be around me,
When are you going to retire?
I'll pick the spot one day.
One day.
I'm continually challenged. Sue, my wife, would love to have me retire quite a while back. I couldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. The inactivity would be unbelievable. I think it has kept me in the loop to stay involved as I have. I think it's mentally kept me in the loop, knowing what I need to do next in my career. And I have plans right on out of things to do. And I've got approaches from other industry wanting me to set up genetic formulas for them in regard to hogs and cattle. And that has nothing to do with my age or nothing else. It's just, am I qualified to do it? And that's all they care about.
Still a lot left to do.
A lot left to do. A lot left to do. And I totally love the industry. But I have never failed at any time. I have never failed to give full credit to anything I am and have done in this industry, but to Oklahoma State. It has been, I can't describe it actually. It was a challenge to start with, and then it became a work of love that I didn't want to disappoint anyone. I really did not. I wanted to reward them for their efforts, and that's what I've tried to do.
Well, we appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.